Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back again, everyone. Thank you for joining us here for another episode. Really excited to have you all here today. Today's topic is going to be about shooting. We're going to talk about developing shooters and how to make good shooters into great shooters. We as coaches can never have enough offense on the court, and we all know that good shooters are so essential for a great offense, no matter what system you want to run on the offensive end. I don't know any coach who will say that they have too many good shooters. I don't think that's even possible. So today's guest is going to share what they do to develop shooters and share some tips that will hopefully help you as well. I'm glad to be joined today by the boys coach at Heritage Academy in Mesa, Arizona, which makes us practically neighbors. My guest today is Coach Ben Dawson. Coach, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm thankful. It was really nice meeting you.
Yeah, this would be great. And as a coach myself, who's always looking to get more shooters on the floor, I'm going to be learning just as much as the listeners are today. So, Coach, I gave away a little bit about where you coach at and what the location is, but let's go ahead and get into your basketball journey, your coaching journey. Talk to us about where the game has taken you and where you're currently at right now.
Okay, well, it all started out, I played basketball at Hamilton High School, had some...
Nice.
Yep. So I was back in the Kevin Hartwick era. And so my senior year, I was injured. So I kind of really soured my kind of basketball career. So I kind of fell out of love with the game for a few years. And then 2 years ago, I get a call. I get someone I used to know at Hamilton was now coaching at Heritage, and he wanted me to become the junior high B coach, And so I was like, sure, I'll come and do it, And he also was like, hey, if you want to help out, come help out with the varsity team as well. So I was kind of a varsity assistant junior high B coach. And so once I walked into that gym, it was like the pearly gates open. I could hear the trumpets. I just knew like I was back, like coaching was where I needed to be with my life, So the junior high B team, a bunch of great kids, didn't have all the greatest talent in the world though. We ended up winning 2 games, but they're just great kids. Our varsity team, I could tell as soon as I walked in, we had a lot of talent, but we just had to get it organized. And so about 2 games in the season for I don't know, I still to this day don't know the reason, the head coach left the school. And so our team was left without anybody. And so they were looking around and I was the guy there. So they had me step up to the plate, and they brought in Coach Portilla to come help. He was the head football coach. He's won 8 state championships at our school for football. He played in the NFL for the Atlanta Falcons, probably one of the best leaders I've ever met in my entire life. And we kind of teamed up together and got those guys going, and we lost in the state championship 2 years ago to Glenview. And then this year, our guys were real motivated, came back, and we won it all. So it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, that is excellent. And for those listening who don't know, I kind of mentioned a little bit Hamilton. That's big time over there here in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it's a real. I'm actually going to ask you about that because I know about the pressure that's put on being at Hamilton. I know what the standards are over there. So being around that program at Hamilton, how did that sort of help prepare you for where you're currently at right now? What kind of lessons did you take from being there?
Oh, immensely. Kevin Hartwick ran one of the most structured programs I've ever seen in my life, top to bottom. Everything was accounted for. We were always training the right way. We were always playing the right way. His off-season conditioning and lifting programs were elite. Like, we were always in the gym. We were always lifting, and we were always getting after it, making sure our bodies were right to go for the season. So just the way he structured things was amazing. He was just top to bottom organization. So that's something I really am trying to emulate from what he did. His structure and organization was incredible.
Yeah, Absolutely. Even I've heard about that in the
Mhm.
structure and the organization. I feel like a lot of those elite programs and ones that are successful year in and year out, you know what the drill is, you know what the program
Mhm.
is, you know what the expectations are. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, Coach, we all know that 2020, 2021, crazy year,
Mhm.
especially for coaching basketball, and so many coaches had so many things that they had to navigate and work through, just to even have a season. And at Heritage Academy, you went all the way. CAA D3 state champions, a tremendous amount of success. So, how did you and your staff and your program, how did you navigate everything this past year in order to achieve the success that you did?
Well, it all started with the dedication of our guys. Losing in that state championship the year before, it really stung them because we truly believed we should have won. But at the end of the day, the other team just flat out beat us. And we knew in that offseason we needed to get better. And so once we went into the COVID protocols and everything got shut down, our boys were, real worried, disappointed, but they all at home kept with it, kept, getting shots up in their backyards, going to parks, shooting. And then once we were finally allowed to do at least outside conditioning, every single one of our guys was at 5 a.m. because that heat's pretty intense, so we had to
Mm.
go outside. We were at a park running hills, running miles, just doing whatever we could to condition. So it really started with the dedication of our boys. I can't stress that enough. So
I mean, any player that's going to be out there at 5 a.m., but also
mhm.
out there in Arizona in the summer,
Yes, at
trust me, they
5
want it.
a.m. it's still 90 degrees. Once we hit 6 a.m., it's already 100. So
Yeah, 100%. And just to follow up with that, what has this year kind of taught you? What have you learned about yourself as a coach through this experience this past year?
it's really taught me, just how to be patient and disciplined, because I was very gung ho. I wanted to get after it, but we had to wait so long. And then in a game, when it translated to games, it taught me, sometimes you gotta let players play through mistakes, from year one to year two. So I started, yanking guys less, letting them play through mistakes. And I feel like that really helped me and then showing that just showed my players I trusted them more. And so once that trust started building between me and the players, it just really took us to another level. So.
Yeah, I like that idea of patience a lot. I feel like just with some of the stop and
Mhm.
start and just the
And just
uncertainty.
yeah, and it's the overall development of players, because you forget a lot of our guys also at a small school, like most of them don't play club basketball. Most of them are playing multiple sports, two,
Hmm.
three sports. And so really the only time they touch a basketball is during basketball season, and so it really, it took some of our guys halfway through the season to really get that basketball feel,
Sure.
not playing basketball in a full year. So we just really had to be patient with our guys and their development and their skills and understanding our system. So
And to add to that, just based on the story you shared about them getting up at 5 a.m., I
mhm.
feel like a lot of the coaches who have had a lot of success and a lot of programs that were really successful this past year, the teams kind of stayed together. They were still
Yes.
working, they were still connected
Mhm.
and everything. That sounds like you had that experience as well, where your team was sticking together this past year through everything.
Yeah, yeah. We didn't have a set schedule, but we still had a Zoom calls every now and then. I was still checking up on all my guys, texting them, how you doing? How's your family? Just we all were really close, so we just all kept in contact with each other. So
Yeah, no, that's great, and probably just makes everything that happened that much sweeter too. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
All right, coach. So we're going to talk a little bit about just shooters and developing shooters. So let's start with I like to say it kind of like the finished product. So when you are looking at a great shooter, what is it that you're seeing? What, in your opinion, makes a great shooter?
For me, a great shooter, what's most important is I would say release time on their jump shot and be able to shoot with consistency. Release time to me is extremely important because when games get tighter and they close out quicker, you got to be able to get that shot off effectively, with pressure on you. And then consistency is key. You got to be able to knock it down at a high percentage. So And also just correct mechanics. There's always the fundamentals that I stress, are the most important, just fixing those little mistakes to get it right.
And to sort of add to that, in your experience of that great shooter and seeing
Mhm.
that great shooter, what do you think is maybe the hardest part? Like, what's that like piece that you think players have like the most difficult time kind of getting to what's that last piece that seems to be the hardest for them to sort of have click in to become that great shooter?
I would definitely say learning how to move without the ball when they're being denied, because most shooters, they're used to like, okay, my point guard dribbles in lane and then passes to me for an open shot, or just unnatural swing. But once teams start learning you and scouting you, they're going to stop helping off you. So now what do? A lot of shooters just stand there and they let themselves be taken out of the game. The next step is learning how to come off a screen, how to read a screen. Is a guy chasing you? Do you curl? Is he going underneath, switching? Do you flare off of it? How do you make those reads, and do you have the activity to do it? Because that's when it's going to take you to the next level as a shooter. Because that's going to get your attempts up. A great, they talk about Duncan Robinson. They want him to get a minimum of 10 threes a game, minimum. Just attempts. They don't, because they know he's such a great shooter. If he just gets 10 attempts up, he's at least going to make 3 or 4, and if he gets hot, 5 or 6. So to get those attempts up, you got to be able to get open consistently. So I would say off-ball movement is most important, taking that shooter to the next level.
And then as a coach, are you purposely working on things within your offense to create movement so players are kind of forced to get open? Or how does that kind of work within your offensive philosophy for players to kind of work on that sort of skill?
Yes, so we do a lot of like live training drills, like 2-on-2, 2-on-3 to isolate parts of our offense. What we run is a lot of ball screen continuity. We go from pretty much a lot. It's almost fake, creates like a fake double screen. We go from a ball handoff into a pick and roll, and we keep attacking both sides of the court with that same like offense. And then obviously, like a lot of people, we run a lot of horn sets where we set off ball double screens and all that good stuff for our shooters. So. And then how we'll train that is we'll get, break it down in just the 2-on-2, 3-on-3 drills where we have the defense send the different coverages. Like we'll tell the defender, okay, chase this time. So now when your guy's getting chased off a screen, you got to curl to the bucket. Okay, now switch the screen. When they switch it, you got to flare out, find the gap between it, almost like it's a zone defense, and get that shot. Now if they're going underneath, you flare out and hit it. So just we really train those reads that you make out of our offenses.
In a practice situation, how much time do you spend on shooting, or how much does shooting kind of work within what you like to do within like a practice?
We spend literally 50% of, so every 2-hour practice, we spend an hour on shooting every single day. Every single one of our guys gets a minimum of 300 makes every day. That's the goal we make. So we count makes and not shots. We're trying to get 300 makes. So we kind of have a little routine we have of movement shooting included with stationary shooting. So we'll start out with 20 form shots, 10 free throw line shots, 10 3-point shots, and then we'll go around the world. So we'll do 10 corner twos, 10 corner threes, 10 wing twos, 10 wing threes, etc. We finish the sides of the court. And then we'll go, the movement shooting will go, elbow to elbow, wing to corner, baseline to baseline. And then after we do that, we'll get together and start working the live shooting. So
And with that, how are the expectations for each player in terms of how many shots that they are expected to make, maybe in terms of percentage wise and whatnot? Are there certain, I guess, levels to your expectations of how many makes should be going in or how many shot attempts should be taken?
yeah, so what we do is we do make 10 or shoot 20. So we're aiming for 50% when we're shooting in drills. So if you can't make at least 10 shots and 20 attempts, we go on to the next guy. Because some of our groups will be there all day if we just rely on the makes. So you got to keep them moving.
And as a follow-up to that, do you have a conversation with your players about, like, you're a green light shooter, you're like a yellow light shooter? Do players kind of know already what they're supposed to be? Do you have those conversations with them?
I probably give more freedom than I should, but I really have the green light for all my guys because I say, hey, if we train to shoot like this, I believe all five of my guys should be shooting threes, and that's my goal, is to have all five of my players on the court can hit 3-pointers at all times. So, were there guys on our team who maybe shot more threes than they should this year? Probably, but at the end of the day, some of my big guys, sometimes they need that little carrot, that reward for doing all the dirty work, getting all those rebounds, getting block shots. Is like I'll take a few missed threes for you to do the dirty work. So
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches will say, "Man, did they shoot too many threes?" Yeah, probably.
yeah,
So you're probably not alone in that for
yeah.
sure.
And then even analytics, like our bad 3-point shooters are shooting, like 30%. But if you shoot 33%, analytically, that's like shooting 50% from the field. So even our bad shooters, it's not that bad when you do the math. Like some of our guys were shooting maybe 30, maybe 28%,
Hmm.
and their attempts weren't super high. Like it was maybe 12 attempts all year, through 16, 17 games. But even that, 3 out of 12 is, I think, 28, 30%, and that's maybe 40% from the field effectively. So
Sure. And as a transition into that, when you're looking at game film, if you're focusing on just the shooting aspect of it, how do you kind of parse through game film and kind of work through, okay, this is, these are good shots, or this is a certain percentage I want to get to? How do you kind of identify maybe a good shooting game when you're looking at film?
good shooting game is definitely, I still, even though I believe in shooting a lot of threes, I definitely still believe in quality threes. Like, we have some good players, but we don't have any James Hardens who I really want hitting step back threes and all those crazy things. Or even we still teach, because our philosophy is penetrating kick, penetrating kick. We want our guys getting to the bucket and forcing teams to help. If they help, we kick to the shooters. If they don't help, we score. So we'd really believe if someone's closing out on you hard, we want you to pump fake and attack. We don't want a whole lot of highly contested threes, because we believe if that guy's highly contesting you, if you get to the bucket, it's going to create an even better shot for the next guy. And if they aren't helping, then you got to lay up. So
Yeah, I found that sometimes something that I experience is sometimes we have players who, they can take like a good shot, but I know that, the defender wasn't closing out properly, and it's like, man, they could have just attacked, it could have gone by. And
yeah.
so, you kind of have that same situation. And do you have those conversations with your players about, like, hey, this is like an all right shot or like a good shot, but man,
Yeah.
you could have really attacked here. You could have, made one extra pass or something like that. Do you find yourself having those
Oh
conversations?
yeah, all the time. And the conversation's different with different guys. Like our player of the year, Josh McKinney. I'm honestly okay with him shooting more when he's contested. He's the type of guy, like, I want him shooting 10 to 15 threes a game. He's that good of a shooter. So I'm like, hey, even if you're slightly contested, you're a good enough shooter and you have a good enough release and good enough range where I want you shooting that even if you're slightly contested.
Mhm.
Other guys, it's like that exact conversation. Hey, he closed out and you attack him.
Yeah, and I think that comes to the really knowing your players, right? Knowing
Yeah.
your personnel, knowing who can do what, or trying to get a good shot into a great shot, or things of that nature, for sure. Um, can you talk about experiences that you've had in the past where you are really like developing shooters? Maybe they come in like really raw, or maybe like their
Mhm.
form isn't exactly where it needs to be. What are some things that you do to try and maybe correct the more raw type of player, and even kind of try and create a shooter out of them?
Mhm. Well, definitely the biggest thing is just hard work and consistent repetition. You got to shoot 200 to 300 makes every single day consistently. So it really starts with the player wanting to become a shooter. And we've had some guys like that. Our highest shooting player was a kid named Quinn Davis, who came into us, and he shot 43% from the field. And, he really has come a long way in his jump shot. And how we did that, we're just focusing on the fundamentals, and being disciplined. Because a lot of kids, you'll show them the right way to shoot, and once they start missing it, because you're going to regress. This is the old saying I say: you take one step forward to take 10 steps forward. One step backwards to take 10 steps forward on your jump shot.
Mm.
You gotta when you change those fundamentals in that form, it's really gonna break down. You're gonna get worse, but after you stick with it, you're gonna have a jump. Like you're gonna jump immediately. And so how we train that is just lots of form work. Like shoot to 4 or 5 feet out in the middle of the paint. Just hundreds of form shots. Being disciplined. Being disciplined. The kid has got to be disciplined in how he changes it, because a lot of kids, once they start missing, they start reverting to their old bad habits. So you just got to stay on them.
And the practice part, as you said, is just so important. You talked about the amount of makes that they have to make,
Yes.
and seeing the ball go in. Do you have a certain philosophy about what maybe like every player's form like should look like? Are there certain things that you will let certain players do if they're making their shot consistently? What's your philosophy on that?
So my philosophy is a one motion shot. I'm a heavy believer in the one motion shot. I like my guys to have a clean, just smooth release. And what I really look at is arc on the ball and the snap of the wrist, because you see the best shooters, Curry and Lillard, their wrist snap is elite. They snap it, their fingers are pointed at the ground every time. How I like to call it is, you finish with the swan. You make a swan neck with your arm every single time. I got that from Bobby Hurley, the
Yeah, I like that.
senior, Bobby Hurley senior. I saw him. That's how he liked to describe it. So I really just look at arc and rotation on their ball. You know, I'm not. I believe in fundamentals, but if a guy is maybe shooting a little bit differently, but he has great arc and great rotation on the ball, and his release is still smooth, I'll let him shoot it maybe a little bit differently, because that's just what he's more comfortable with. Everyone's bodies are a little bit differently. So I really just look at that swan and the release and the snap of the wrist. That's really what's important. And then the one motion, because when you start having hitches, or you start yanking the ball behind your head, that's when inaccuracies come. It's harder to get that muscle memory, and it's a slower shot. So
Yeah, I like the swan. I remember. I think when I was younger, we talked about like the hand in the cookie jar.
yes,
and,
yes.
and yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's
and
funny.
the swan, it makes you think of because you got to release high. Because some guys, they'll push the ball like forward, so you kind of got to think of it as like a launch angle. If he's pushing the ball forward, it's flat. But if he's swanning it, snapping the wrist at the top, getting that backspin, that's like the right launch angle you got to have.
Yeah, sure. Um, you talked about the amount of makes that players need to make, and for players to become really good shooters, as you and I both know, a lot of practice has to go into it. A lot of working on their shot has to go in. When you're communicating with your players, do you have to let them know, like, hey, on your own time you need to be doing X, Y, and Z when it comes to your shot? Are there certain specific maybe things or guidelines that you do to hold them accountable for that? Or is that something you're just going to say, like, hey, you have to do this, and I'll know one way or the other whether you
Yeah.
have been or not?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I definitely tell my guys, if you really want to take your jump shot or any part of your game to the next level, like being at practice, 4 or 5 times a week is not enough. Like you got like the best players, they go and work on their own. And so I don't really have guidelines for that, but I can tell in the gym who's been shooting and who's not been shooting. It's just one of those things you can tell right away who's practicing. So
And yeah, I 100% agree that it's kind of takes like on your own time, and you
hmm
kind of know exactly like who's going to get better
yeah.
and who hasn't been. Do you work a lot on a player's shot in season? I ask because I hear a lot of conversation about how some coaches are like, I don't want you to think about your shot. We're just going to work
mhm.
with what you have. I know some coaches try and tinker here and there if a player's shot during the season, but of course, we're so stretched for time when it
Yeah.
comes to that. So I'm curious about your philosophy on that.
So I believe you can make small tweaks that aren't gonna like be major changes, but I save the major changes till off season definitely, because sometimes you just gotta completely start from the ground up on a guy's jump shot. So, but during the season we'll make little tweaks, like I say like a lot of guys, if when they catch the ball they keep their wrist forward, And when you have your wrist forward, you naturally have to cock it back and then shoot it. And so when I tell them on the catch, keep your wrist back, a lot of times that's just a little tweak that'll get their one motion a little bit smoother. Just little things on footwork. Should the guy step into a shot? Should he shoot off 2 feet? Launch angle. Just you can make tiny little tweaks.
What's your belief on footwork and where feet should be aligned? There's a lot of, there's 10 toes of the basket. There's, you kind of turn and kind of are a
Okay.
little bit, you're not completely squared the basket. What's your belief on that?
Oh, I'm a heavy believer in the tilt. Heavy believer in the tilt. I believe you should have the tilt because if you stand in front of a basket and you put 10 toes down, you go up to shoot, you can stand there, you can feel the tightness in your shoulders. You're squeezing the ball. If you do just a slight little tilt to the left or to the right, depending if you're right or left-handed, you can feel now your shoulders loosened up, your elbows still straight, and now you can get into that one motion just really cleanly. And if you watch the top guys in the league, like Curry and Lillard, they both shoot with heavy tilts and also helps generate power as well. So it really just it loosens up that shoulder so you can keep that elbow straighter and have a cleaner one motion shot.
I think that a lot of shooting is kind of going that way because of what you just referenced about how, people say, well, if you watch, the best shooters and you look at where their feet are, they're not necessarily doing the whole like 10 toes of the basket or
Yeah.
everything. They have that angle and they have that tilt to them for sure. Kind of it's not an off topic question, but it just came to me because you just kind of mentioned about Curry and everything. Do you have to deal with like players who are, trying to emulate too much or trying to, maybe do too much like a Steph Curry and James Harden? They're trying to do like way too much of their shot. Do you find that you have to like slow them down, or are they pretty bought in and maybe they just mess around and do some of that stuff on their own time?
Yeah, when we were in the season, I really didn't have any problems with bad shot because we were a really unselfish team. So I didn't really have a bad problem with shot selection. Of course, you got occasional guys shoot a crazy shot in practice, but nothing, nothing crazy. I'm sure they do that in their own time, but I mean, we do my top shooter right now. We are starting to develop his range and trying to get him a more Curry, NBA range. So that is something we are working with our kind of our elite shooters. So.
And as a follow-up to that, I think that that's one of the bigger concerns that a lot of coaches have is that players are trying to shoot from like way too far
Mhm.
out, especially at a younger and younger age, and their
Yeah.
form isn't there to do it. So they end up doing like the heave or, just
Mhm.
kind of chucking it, throwing it over their shoulder, anything like that. When you have players, especially more at like the younger ages, like incoming freshmen and things like
Mhm.
that, do you find that they might be shooting beyond their range or that their form might be a little messed up because of that and you have to do some fixes with that? Have you gone through that yourself?
Yeah, a little bit. Sometimes them shooting from there, they get that natural one motion. Other times, they, like you said, they just cock it behind their head and throw like a baseball or football. So, yeah, I would say because I'm definitely a believer. Like probably like I don't know, elementary basketball. There shouldn't be a 3-point line. Like these kids should be shooting close to like learning the game. Because I do think that's a problem, especially since a lot of time at the youth level you don't have like great like top tier coach, just dads volunteering and stuff like that. So like they're not going to get taught the right way of, okay, work inside out, get to the bucket, correct form. So I do believe at the youth level we should focus on mechanics a little bit more, but it hasn't been a huge problem for us. So
That's good. I'm glad. I've heard some definite horror stories before of players shooting 35 feet out, trying to like 10 years
yeah,
old.
I've been lucky. I've been lucky.
That's awesome. We talked a lot about shooting threes and the way that works within the frame of your offense. What's the role, if any, do you think, like the mid-range jump shot, that 15-footer plays? Is that something you want to see often? Is that something your players even really work on a lot? Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of our guys
Yeah.
shooting mid-range jumpers. I'm not, you know, we have a couple guys who are really, our starting point guard and our shooting guard. We gave them a little bit more freedom to shoot that, but unless you're one of our top two ball handler scorers, we really didn't want you shooting mid-range jump shots. We wanted to get to the bucket and draw the defense or kick it out for the 3-point line. That was really our philosophy.
Yeah, it's also I found, and you can probably speak to this too, that players really don't work on it a lot.
Yeah.
And I've seen some 15-foot jump shots that seem to go 17 feet
Yeah.
sometimes, or
Yeah.
all over the place. And has that been kind of your experiences? Are they not that comfortable shooting a mid-range jump shot?
Yeah, I would agree with that because I mean, I'll be honest, we don't practice really our mid-range jumpers. I mean, we practice catch and shoots just because that's
Hmm.
how you train a shooter. You got to have like training different distances helps lock in your distance from long range. So we definitely practice our mid-range jumpers, but we don't do a lot of we don't do a whole lot of off the bounce mid-range work. So
Yeah.
it's not something we practice because we don't necessarily believe in it. So.
Yeah, and as you just said, it they can look very very odd when to see the
Yeah.
players try to do them if they don't practice. I mean, anything I guess that they don't practice much,
Yeah.
probably will look a little interesting in a game like competitive situation for sure. Do you do in practice, or do you have players work on their shot or their form when they're tired, or when they've been running a lot or going through a lot of reps? Are there things you do to either simulate that, or does that just sort of naturally happen where they're going to get kind of tired when they're shooting throughout the course of a practice?
Yeah, exactly. So because like I said, we shoot for an hour each practice. So those last, 15 minutes, and we do the entire hour with no break, just continuous. So by the end, and we do a lot of movement shooting. So when you're getting in that movement shooting, running spot to spot, you start to get a little bit tired. So it just kind of naturally simulate. And then of course I'll do the old coach thing when shooting free throws. I'll make them run and then shoot free throws. So that's one way we simulate free throws at the end of the game.
Yeah, the free throw one I think is really big too. I know
Yeah,
that
yeah,
a lot of players will be really good free throw shooters if they're not
yeah.
tired at all, but then, when you
Yeah,
get
I
when
would say we pretty much only practice free throws when we're tired. So
yeah. No, I think that that's great. Um, the mental side of things, as we all know, players that they're going to go through slumps, they're going to go through challenges or difficulties and things of that nature. How do you kind of work through players if they're in a shooting slump, or then they're excuse me, and they're just not going down?
more reps. That's what I believe in. I just believe in more practice. Get in the gym and iron it out. And then obviously I tell them like every coach, just don't think, shoot the ball. Don't think about your mechanics. Don't aim it, just shoot it. Because a lot of guys, when they start losing confidence, they'll start like I said, they're aiming the ball. They're trying
Mm.
to put it somewhere instead of just relying on their muscle memory, relying on their mechanics, and just shooting it. So just extra work, get extra shots up, and don't think, just shoot.
I like that, like I
Yeah.
like the idea of, like you're a good shooter. It's gotten you this far. Like it'll
Hmm.
continue to. You just gotta get more shots up for sure.
Yep.
Um, it, do you have you been through situations where players, they start like forcing shots, or they start to, really like they try to like quickly get their way out of a slump and try to like force their way out of it, or have you had really good experiences of players, still being patient, working within the flow of the offense to get good looks in their shots?
Yeah, I think every team has a little bit of, occasionally guys will start forcing shots because they feel like they're slumping or they got to get out of it. I just tell our guys, let the game come to you. If you just play the game the right way, good shots will come to you. So I just something we stress, just let the game come to you, because we had a really unselfish team. Our point guard, man, he's like I call him Baby Nash. If he would just get there, he'd throw behind the head passes, behind the back passes. If you're open, he'd find you. So if you just stayed with it, eventually you're going to get a good shot in the court with him playing. So
No, that's great. I like that a lot.
we're really going to miss him next year. I can tell you that. It's going to make my job a lot harder.
Well, as a follow up to that, sometimes we get those situations where, we have players who put in a lot of work. They're really strong shooters. You kind of got everybody where they need to be, and then they graduate and they leave, and then you got a whole new group
Yep.
that's coming in. Are you going to, not to give everything away, but are you going to do any sort of changes within your offense if you find that, okay, this group's kind of lacking in shooting
Mm.
a little bit? Or are you going to say, you know what, we got to stick to this, and they got to kind of rise up to the challenge, so to speak? What's your belief on that?
I'm definitely a believer in adjusting your offense to the guys you have. I'm not sold on one way to play. I think depending on what group you got to change it up and make it a little bit different. Like next year, we really don't have a true point guard in our program, but we're going to have a lot more shooting and a lot more size on the inside next year. So we'll have to play maybe a little bit more of an inside out game, some post work, kicking out threes, have our guys share some duties at the point guard role, have some combo guard type play. So it'll be a little bit differently because that'll be a hole for us next year. We really don't have a true point guard coming up in our program, but we do have great shooters coming up from our JV program. They only lost one game all year, so we had a pretty solid JV team with some really good shooters coming up. And those guys will eventually be. We had two really good freshmen who eventually will be really good point guards, but I, they just, sophomore year, I don't know. I don't want to throw them into the fire, so we might have to just share some combo guard work with some of our seniors. So
Yeah. And that kind of leads into, to have really good shooters, we
mhm.
need to have, good point guards and good
Yes,
passing
yes.
players with good vision. So can you talk about what you do to kind of develop that out of like your point guard, perhaps, to
Mhm.
be able to, have good vision, find good shooters, and be able to, get the pass right where it needs to be?
Well, I was very lucky. Our point guard Miles, he like has that God-given gift of he can has eyes in the back of his head, on the side of his head. Like he has 360 vision all the time while he's in the game, and that's why he's going to be a college guard. So but how I like to teach it, and sometimes he struggled with some reads, is look at the defenders, and what I tell my other guys, look at where the help is coming from, and that's where you know where to go with the ball.
Mm.
Always look at the help. Because a lot of guys are looking at the bucket or looking at their own man. Look where the help is coming. If you see help, you know someone's got to be open, and you look whoever that guy's guarding, you find that guy. Or if you don't see help, that's the green light. Attack, go finish. So.
And I guess it's hard to, quantify this or put it on a good timetable, but like, how long would you imagine that process would be to kind of get the player to that point? Is that something that do you think players can, practice or simulate almost like on their own in terms of their like decision making and being able to, find who's open? Or is that just something where, you need a lot of games, you need a lot of practice experience? Because for me, I'm trying to think of like, how could a player kind of develop that sort of vision or anything on their own, but I can't think of anything. So I'm curious about how long you think that takes for a player to really kind of get that developed.
I definitely think it takes like a year, maybe 2 years, and it just takes lots of games, lots of just live experience, just seeing everything. Just see 'cause people help different ways, teams help at different times, and some people don't help at all. So it just game experience. I feel like you could get creative with some simulation drills, but it's just not the same as playing a real game with five guys on the court and five defenders. It's never the same. So
Yeah,
just
for sure.
games.
Yeah, for sure. It's never can play too many games. I think that's why the summer and everything is
Yeah,
so important, which
yeah,
I
it
think is even
is.
more amazing that, your experience last year. At least I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't think you were really doing too much in terms of like a lot of game work in the
Oh,
summer,
zero,
right?
zero. Yeah.
So the fact that they had that as much success as they did, I think is a real testament to your players, that you had to still, have that sharp of vision and decision making and
Mm.
everything.
Yeah, we didn't even get to touch basketballs as a team till, a couple weeks before the season. So it was definitely an adjustment. So our guys, they were ready to go. So
Yeah, for sure. No, that's awesome. That I think that's great. Um, how much do you have your players, look at their own film? Do you ever have them look at their own like game film? Do you ever have them look at their own shooting? I've heard of, coaches who, they'll do like different apps and different things like that
mm.
for players to kind of work on their shooting. Is What sort of things do you have players kind of do to maybe either reflect or work on improving their shot on their own?
Yeah, so Like that's the one thing I'll do when guys are in a slump. I'll show them film of when they weren't slumping, because then it just, for whatever reason, it gets their confidence going, and they kind of can see, oh, okay, that this is how I was doing it. This is how I looked. That's one way we did with it, and then yeah, just it's always good for it's like a golf swing. It's always good for a guy just to see what he looks like when he's shooting the ball, and maybe some things will click. So we weren't too heavy on the film with shooting. We just we focus on reps, 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 but we did do a little bit of film work.
Yeah, it's such a balance, I think, between like looking at film versus like paralysis by analysis and looking
Yeah,
at way
yeah,
too much, and then
yeah.
you start thinking, oh, did I do this little hitch here? Did I do this, that, or
Hmm.
the other? And
Yeah,
you can really get in your head with shooting
yeah,
for sure, I
yeah.
think, and that's kind of like something you mentioned, right? Like, well, just stick with your form's good, but you just got to keep shooting. You got to keep
Exactly,
shooting and
exactly.
keep going at it. Yeah. Um, do you have players do a lot of work within your offense in terms of things like the one dribble pull up, or in terms of working on things like their pump fakes, or different sort of like
Hmm.
not complex moves necessarily, but like moves like that? Or does it just sort of have to come naturally within what you're working in practice, where like, hey, you just got to read the situation and kind of make the right move from there? How does that kind of work for you in your program?
Yeah, the simple move we teach is we teach the pump fake and then the side dribble, so we're still shooting the three. So we're really trying to get that. So that's what we'll do in our team shooting. We'll do what we call Duke shooting, which is line in the corner, line at the top of the key, line in the opposite corner, and then you go around this, you shoot, get your own rebound, fly at the shooter. The shooter pump fakes, dribbles, sidesteps once, hits the three. So
No, that's a great one. I think that's up on YouTube too. I'm pretty sure I've
yeah,
seen that
yeah.
up there as well. So no, that's really good. Are there any other specific like shooting related drills that you really like, or things that simulate action that you're looking for? Just like kind of standalone, almost like shooting type drills.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I love the class. My favorite thing I love is the classic, three-man, two-ball shooter. You have one guy shooting, one guy rebound, one guy passing, two basketballs. So that, because really, that's the best way to get the most amount of shots up in the least amount of time. Because you're just going one after another. You practice all the spots you get in the game, and then once you do that, you transition into movement shooting. So now you have guys. What we teach our guys to sprint to the shot. So you're running, we'll start, the classic. We'll go, corner to wing, twos and threes. And then we'll go, elbow to elbow, sprint to the spot. So you're just moving, sprinting off the spot. And then and after that, we'll get together as a team, and then we'll work off coming off the screens. So you're just act. So you walk the. Because I learned from our JV coach at Hamilton. I was super lucky. We had a guy named Jeff Malone who, for
Hmm.
his career average 20 points a game as a shooter, and he taught me really well how to move without the ball. And so we teach our guys, you walk them in, you start in slow, and then boom, you just shoot out of the cannon and go and get that ball full speed, stop on a dime, raise up and shoot it. So
No, that's I think that's super useful. Also sounds really
mhm.
practical for
Yes.
situations that players are going to go in, and I
Because
think
I
that.
see,
Go
yeah, I
ahead.
see so many kids who are great shooters, but they don't know how to use screens or how to come off a screen. So that's something that's really important for us is learning how to use off-ball screen.
Yeah, I no, I like that a lot, and I think that any sort of thing that works with shooting that will simulate action that they would
Hmm.
normally be
Yeah,
seeing,
I'm a heavy believer in that.
I think is really good. You talked a little bit about screens and the importance of players being able to go off of screens and read off of screens. Let's just talk about the screening, the active screening itself. What do you need from your screeners in order to set the best screen they can in order to free up a shooter? What's your philosophy on what makes a good screen?
Don't be afraid to make contact is the number one. A lot of guys, they'll just, if you let them, they'll just stand in one spot. I don't like our guys stand in one spot. Find the guy. Don't set a moving screen, but time it right. Find him, get in a good position, and force contact. Force him to hit you. Because once they start getting hit a couple of times, they'll go underneath, and your shooter just has to flare out, and it's wide open threes all day. And then once he starts chasing, you got to force him to make contact so that when our guy curls, he's behind him a step or two, so he's got the advantage to the basket.
Is that something that you found has just been like a trend with a lot of players that you work with, where they don't like the contact, they don't kind of seek that out? Is that something that you've kind of noticed as something throughout the years?
I don't think it's not that they don't seek it out. It's just like they're going through the motions. They're like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
just go set a screen, I stand, and so it's really got a teaching just that live action. Go do it. It's just like almost like an unconscious thing. They just like, oh, I just go stand here, set a screen, whatever. It's like, no, you got to go find a guy and make contact.
I think that's a really good point, and that some actions, and I think screening is definitely one of them, that can become almost like mechanical.
Yeah, exactly, like robotical. Yeah,
Yeah, and you're just sort of you're doing it, but you're not really really getting after it, or you're really
exactly,
not
exactly.
going after it. Yeah, no, for sure. I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, I think with shooting in general, Coach, um, there's just so much out there. There's just so much out there in
Yeah.
terms of like, here's how you shoot, here's how you do this, that, and the other. We kind of talked about the 10 toes thing. Are there any other like myths, or are there any other things about like shooting that you think people learn or are taught that you just don't see the value in, or you just think are maybe just overemphasized? Are there any just things in general about shooting that you just think are maybe a bit nonsensical?
Yeah, so the big thing obviously we talked about is the 10 toes, and the other thing is how a lot of people want people to have their like release point, set point like above their head, like really high. Like a lot of people teach that they want the ball above your head to shoot. And that's why you see a lot of people like cuz they just don't have the power to get that ball up, or it's a really flat shot. So I I know I go back to it. Curry has that really low shot pocket which allows him to shoot from range really easily and just have that quick one motion shot. And then the other one is dipping the ball. So I don't want my guy dipping the ball below his waist, but just a slight little dip I teach like right above the belly button helps get that rhythm in your shot. Because rhythm is also something that's incredibly important in shooting. Just having good rhythm, and just that little dip helps get you your power and rhythm when you shoot the ball.
Do you find that I'm thinking about like that dip, to
Mm,
me, and that could just be in my experience.
yeah.
I don't find that comes naturally to a lot of players, or that's not something that they really like think about a lot. Is
Mhm.
that something in specifically that you feel like you're teaching them or really getting them to think about? Is that one of those little like tweak things that maybe your players
Yeah.
don't do?
Yeah, because a lot of guys were taught you catch the ball and you go straight up into your shot, and a lot of time that just ruins the rhythm. So just that little dip to kind of connect your legs to your arms, just get that rhythm going is good. But obviously, I don't want the shot to be slow. I don't want my guys bringing it all the way like below their waist, and going back up. It just got to be just a little one, just to get that rhythm going.
And we talked a little bit about like with a player shooting, about like the one motion, and about
Mhm.
the way it gets released. um is there like a certain, I guess, not to get too mathematical, but like, are you able to how are you able to kind of quickly tell like, okay, this shot is a good quick release versus, oh, this is just a little bit too slow? What are some ways that players and maybe coaches can learn to just speed up a player's shot maybe just a little bit, to make sure they get it off well and in time?
Yeah, definitely doing like the fly out drills. The way I guess I just have like a little mental check in my head if I think it's fast enough. I don't have an exact science to it. I just look at it and say, okay, that's quick enough. But you can once you're in the game, you can figure out if okay, maybe this guy's release is a little slow. We gotta quicken it up. But definitely a lot of the fly out drills are really
Hmm.
good for working that.
Yeah, I like those too. I like those, strong closeouts,
Yes,
flying right by
yes.
him, fly by, and just making sure it
Hmm.
gets off in time, for sure. Uh, I think one of the things that coaches sometimes deal with, and I know I have before, is players almost like self-identify themselves as shooters to the point where they don't really put a lot of work maybe in other aspects of their
Hmm.
offensive game, specifically with like going to the basket or,
Yes.
driving and
I
initiating
was one of those
contact.
kids when I was younger.
So, how do you sort of break that out of a player? Are there things you got to do to kind of say like, hey, you can't just be a shooter, no matter how good one you are. You got to get to the basket and create contact and finish at the rim. How do those conversations go, or how do you kind of work with those players?
Yeah, it's just a conversation you got to keep having with them. Showing them film like opportunities where they could have got easy buckets. And that's why I said also, moving without the ball. As a good shooter, you can't just stand there and want the ball to come to you. You got to work for it. And if they're taking away the three, you got to know how to get to the bucket. So it's just a conversation that we keep having with them.
Are is it just a thing where they've worked so much on their shooting that you think, okay, they're just not that comfortable attacking the basket? Or do you have players who are like they don't want to, get in the trees and create contact, or have you had kind of a mixture of all sorts of situations that you're working through with that?
Yeah, I think it depends kid to kid and make sure sometimes they're just so confident in that 3-point shot they think every single one they shoot's going to go in, so that's just the shot they're going to take. And I think it's just a mixed bag, like you said. Depends kid to kid. Some have different reasons, maybe contact, maybe they just don't have faith or belief in their finishing ability, so
Yeah.
different kid to kid.
And with those shooters, really quickly, before I was going to ask this question earlier and I forgot, but now I just remembered it. With shooters, the shooting the threes, rebounds typically tend to be long, but 3-point shots could go a lot of different places. Do you
Hmm.
work specifically on things related to offensive rebounding and work on that nature in terms of how it goes with your shooting? Do you not emphasize it as much? What's your philosophy and belief on that?
So what we teach is we know we do the classic 3-on-3 rebounding drill. I'll shoot, I'll fire up shots from the corner, from the wing. So we work on rebound a little bit that, even though that's more defensive rebounding focus. But what I tell my guys is like majority of the time the ball's coming off the opposite side of the guy where he was shooting.
Hmm.
So line yourself up with whatever angle is opposite of where he shot, because that's 9 times out of 10 that's where the ball's going if he misses. So.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I love that free on free
Yeah,
rebounding
yeah,
as well too. It's such a classic one, but I think
yeah,
that it just works on
yeah.
so many
Everything.
yeah, it just works on so many great things for sure. Um last question here before we hit our concluding segment. One of the things that players sometimes struggle with, and I know coaches are always looking to improve on, especially if you have a lot of shooters, is spacing and making sure that the
Hmm.
floor is spaced
So important.
appropriately. Yeah, it is. It's incredibly important. So, what do you do, or how do you work on that to make sure that the spacing is right on the floor and the flow of your offense?
So every single practice we start with the 3-line rebound outlet drill, and we teach our guys to run to the corners for the three on the fast break, run to the corners. And so that'll space it out for the guy attacking and just creates when you run in the corners, it creates unbelievable spacing in transition. Whoever's got the ball, if there's any sort of help, there's wide open shooters in the corner. If those guys stick on our shooters, it's a easy bucket off of transition. So running in the corners is something super important. And all our offenses are either 4 out, 1 in, or 5 out. So we don't do we did a couple times just because of scouting reports, we would run like a flex offense or like a 2 post up offense just if we had a big size advantage. But 9 times out of 10, we're going 5 out or 4 out, 1 in.
And in that sort of offense, then I feel like players could potentially have like a lot of freedom. They could have a
Hmm.
lot of decision making that they get to make, where they kind of assess what's going on and make the best decision for them. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yes, yeah, that's how we play. Our players make the decisions in the court. We have a few horn sets and stuff like that if guys get bogged down or maybe we got a hot shooter we want to look for. But pretty much, I put the ball in my point guard's hands and he makes a decision on what we're doing.
And that I think takes a lot of not only for you as a coach, you got to put a lot of trust in your players,
Hmm.
but then as a coach also you have to be okay with the fact that like your players, they're going to make mistakes sometimes
And
and
that's when I was talking about patience earlier. That's exactly what I was talking about.
right. So as a coach, then how do you balance, letting players kind of work through it within the flow of your offense versus like, okay, like this particular lineup or this particular
Mhm.
person, this isn't working. We got to adjust in some way. How do you kind of balance, that sort of decision?
Yeah, it's just a discussion with me and the other coaches.
Yeah.
We typically let guys play through mistakes, but if it gets to the point where it's just, it's getting ugly, like we make a change and then we start going to, like I said, maybe more patterned offense, like the flex offense. We did that sometimes when we were struggling, or horn sets to get specific shots. So we it was definitely a balancing act. Like sometimes it just what we weren't clicking that day, so we had to go a little bit more structured, a little bit more patterned.
Yeah, it's always good to have those kind of sets that you can kind of just pull out and
Yeah,
be like, all right, well, it's like let's do this. We got this. We know how to do this. Let's run through
yeah,
this a little
yeah.
bit and then
Especially
hopefully
when
get
you're
back.
getting bogged down and things aren't clicking, you just need to run something that's going to get you a good shot.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. All right, coach, this has been great. So to conclude, there's a couple questions I ask every guest. So I'll go ahead and start here with this first one. Thinking back on your coaching career, what is a coaching moment of yours that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
Coaching moment that others can be able to learn from. I would say just definitely, just being resilient, and because I really never thought I'd be getting into coaching or be involved with this, but once I got here, it just the doors open, and I've just been working my butt off. I started from the JVB team, with 7, 8 kids who never even played YMCA basketball, and then our varsity team the year before I got there won 5 games all year, and then 2 years later I'm a state champion, as the coach, and it just I, when I first got that JVB job, I never thought in a million years that this would be the case 2 years later, and so just, even if you don't start with the best job, I would say just start coaching, get where you can and just grind your way up. I've been doing all the dirty work, I drive the vans for the school, and I do whatever I can to help out anywhere. I'll help out with the swim team, I'll help out with the tennis team. Like I just do whatever I can to help and earn the trust of the school, and I've worked my way up, and they've given me the reins. So just being resilient.
You got to have a certain level of resilience, I think,
Yes.
coaching JVB especially.
Yes. Doing a lot of work for very little money. So
Yeah, doing a lot of work, and then also, if you have the patience to work through and work through some of the things you see in some of
Mhm.
those JVB games or those freshman
Yes.
games, if you can make it
Yeah.
through that, yeah, you've definitely kind of earned your stripes for sure. No, that's funny. That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome, coach. And then lastly, I give every guest what I call their 60-second soapbox. Feel free to go longer if you want. I won't put
Mm.
a stopwatch on you. This is where you have the floor to get out your closing message, your final thought, just a final
Mm.
idea that you want to leave the listeners with, coach. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor, and you can take it away.
All right. Well, I definitely wanted to talk more about the ball screen continuity offense we run, because I think it's just a really fantastic offense that a lot of players would love to play in this system, and a lot of coaches would love to coach this system. And I'll just go over a basic, just talk about what we do. So
Sure.
it's a four out, one in. So you space out your weak side, which is the side with only one guard on. You space them out to the corner. Strong side, you got guard in the wing, guard in the corner, and then you got the point guard bringing the ball up the floor. And we teach our five. He rim runs. That'll be our rim runner in transition. The five will be spaced out on the opposite free throw line of wherever the point guard's at. So we have. I'll just start with our basic rotation, and then go into the wrinkles. So the basic rotation, the point guard dribble handoffs to the corner, and that guy comes off the handoff and then comes immediately off a screen roll from the five, and they look for that pick and roll in the attack. If he doesn't have it, he kicks it to the opposite wing, and then they run that same action on the same side. And so just that repeated action just creates so many opportunities to score, so many 3-point attempts, and it really spaces out for that rim roller off the pick and roll. And then once you get that going, you can hit so many backdoor cuts like the backdoor and the baseline when you go to the corner. Once they start cheating up on that, it's wide open on the back door. So that's just my little 60-second blast about the four out, one in ball screen continuity. You can find it if you look up. I found in the video how BYU had the leading 3-point percentage from not this year, but 2 years ago. It's something they ran at the beginning of the season for Alex Barcelo and Jake Toulson and Yoli Childs and those guys. So it's just a really good offense BYU ran. I picked it up from them. So
Awesome. Always good to have some more X's and O's and things to kind of look at and learn from. And yeah, ball screens. I love the idea of it too. You know, I think
and handoffs. It's like it's a legal screen. So
yeah,
it's a great option.
Wonderful. No, that's really great. I'm glad you brought that up and mentioned that, because it seems like it's worked really well for you too, and you've had a lot of success with it. So awesome. Great stuff. Coach Dawson, I want to thank you for spending some time talking to us about just developing shooters, talking about your players and then your offense that you run there at the end. I think that's really helpful, and definitely will give coaches some insight and some tips there to kind of develop their shooters and work with them within the flow of their offense. So, Coach, first off, congratulations on the great amount of success you had this past year. Hopefully you can keep that up and things go really smooth and really well as we enter kind of a more normal season. Thank you so much, Coach.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. And thank you all for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Take care. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.